Connor O'Neill, CF Perspective, joining us now to talk about the CFL Draft. How's it going?
Not bad, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me back on.
I appreciate it. I told Connor offline, I said, we're never going to be, the draft analyst people. I think we need to know where our strengths and our weaknesses are. We are the Markcast. We're going to be talking about Young Rock on the show again today. So it's good to bring on someone that has expertise. So I watched a lot of your guys' stuff on Twitch on Tuesday with the coverage. I bounced around and watched a couple of different streams, but I said, Connor, we got to get you on and talk about the draft. So thank you so much.
Oh no, I appreciate you guys tuning in. That was it was fun to do. We figured, TSN kind of they cover the first 2 rounds usually every year. So we were like, you know what, like we study this thing like year round, as do those guys. No knock on them, but we're like, we study this thing year round. Why don't we take a crack at it and do something on Twitch ourselves? So that was a lot of fun, and it was fun to do. It was a fun night. A lot of surprises too.
Yeah, you said, I messaged you, you said wild night, wild, crazy draft. So takeaways, overarching first off, before we dive in too much.
Yeah, it really didn't go as expected. Like last year too, it was kind of a little bit of more of a wild year too. I mean, a lot of the times you can usually say, okay, here's like kind of where we think the CFL draft is going to go. And a lot of times it does. But these past 2 years, I've just ripped up and burned my mock drafts. As soon as the picks come in, I'm just like, yeah, no, this one's going to be fun. So I'll do it on the fly. But it was fun. There was a lot of unexpectancies, I should say.
So I have here, obviously Jake Burt goes first. Were you anticipating that to Hamilton? And what was kind of the reaction to that? I mean, does the prestige of like the number 1 CFL draft pick, does that carry weight like in the NFL where you're like, oh, Trevor Lawrence, number 1, like that's going to be huge?
It does, but the funny thing before I get into Jake Burt, the funny thing with the CFL draft, it's a lot of the time teams are drafting for futures, and more so than ever this year too, because we didn't get a CFL season, so we still have a 2020 class coming in as well. Now on top of that, we have 2019 class, 2020, now coming into 2020, 2021. So we've got 2 rookie classes going into a rookie camp, and a lot of these guys do too have the option to go back. Even the American guys, we saw guys like Deshaun Stevens out of Maine. He got drafted high, but he's transferring. So he's going to go back and put another year down on tape. The CFL draft, more so than the NFL draft, is about securing these guys for futures and special teams a lot. These are where these guys are going to crack rosters, is special teams. Now, the exception is Jake Burt here. I didn't see him going number 1. I think people did as the draft started to close in, but I was really pat down on Hamilton getting a defensive lineman. But the pick here for Jake Burt, I mean, I get what they're doing. Jake Burt has been in an NFL camp. He's huge. He's 6'3", 260. And he's going to be a guy that's going to come into Hamilton and play now. He is breaking the rule, he's the exception to the rule of drafting the future. Hamilton went out and said, yeah, we're going to draft a guy that's going to play right now. But they do have a guy like Nikola Kalinic, who's a similar role to Jake Burt. So that was kind of head scratching, but Jake Burt, like when you watch him on tape, he's undeniable. I think he's going to contribute right away, especially in some heavy packages and things of that nature. And the cool thing about Jake Burt too, is he is the first ever listed tight end to be drafted number 1 overall in the CFL draft. So he's the first time a tight end has gone 1.
Interesting. Oh, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
What first things first up, do you think overall that people addressed the needs that they had?
Yeah, I think a lot of these teams did. Ottawa, they did sort of. They had a really good first half, kind of fell apart in the back half, but there was a lot of teams. Like this was a year where you look at the draft and you're like, teams had 2 years now to evaluate tape on these guys, especially, well, for U Sports guys I'm speaking of, but so they had 2 years to study these guys' tape. Then they go in and they get, there's some very good NCAA talent drafted as well. So I think between the U Sports talent and kind of the CFL draft is really regionalized. So you see a lot of Montreal guys going to Montreal. They addressed their needs there. But yeah, a lot of these teams did whatever they needed, whether it be linebackers, DBs, offensive linemen. They kind of fell to the teams that they needed to.
Are there teams that you are more excited about now, having gone through Tuesday night? Specifically, how is Edmonton looking now? As I have a vested interest.
I wrote down two teams that I really loved their draft. Edmonton was one of them. I loved Edmonton's draft right off the hop. It was a surprise pick. Wade and myself, my co-host on CFP, we had this guy nailed. Like, we thought he was going to go high. We just didn't think he was going to go first round high. But when you look at this guy, he's a 6'5" offensive or 6'5" defensive lineman, 312, ran a 4.9 40 at 6'5", 312. He tested off the charts, and Edmonton has two really, really good defensive ends in Kwaku Boateng and Matthew Betts. And Cole Nelson is going to be this guy that's going to come in and play. We call it 3-tech here, be your nose tackle down there. He's going to come in and play nose tackle, D tackle, and he's really going to, eat some double teams, triple teams, and free up these really good edge rushers that Edmonton has. So I think Edmonton with Cole Nelson. I think Cole Nelson, depending on whether he wants to go back to Alberta or whether he wants to kind of make a run out of CFL camp this year, I think he could be an impact player. I don't know if we'll see it, but I certainly love Cole Nelson's game and what he's going to do for the future of the edge guys in Edmonton. They went with a linebacker in Grant McDonald, 6'3" linebacker, ran a 4.5 40, speed, and a phenomenal linebacker at the Calgary University program, who just won the Canadian National Championship in 2019. Deontay Glover, a running back in the third round out of Shepherd, D2 program. He had like over 2,000 yards on the season. So phenomenal product in him. Peter Cordes, big offensive lineman, 6'5", 300-pounder. Another nice addition there on the line. And then Keenan Clark, a DB out of Cornell, who had a couple interceptions, and he's pretty speedy as well. So I loved Edmonton's draft.
And what was the second team that you had written down there?
I'm staying in the West. It was the BC Lions. So they went with defensive lineman right away. I really thought they were going to go get a guy like Ben Hladek, who was a linebacker from UBC, 6'4" linebacker, 29 rep bench. He had a 4.17 shuttle, so his lateral movement is insane. But I think teams are a little bit, when you hear big linebacker, it's like, how does he move? Just watch his tape. He moves just fine. I think it was a steal at 322 for him. But Daniel Joseph in the first round, an NC State edge rusher, who I believe he is going back. But again, he's going to go back and play Division I football. He's going to develop a lot more, and then he's going to be able to step in and make an impact in BC. Alaric Jackson, the 4-year starter out of Iowa, they picked him up in the second round. I wasn't as high on him as everybody else, but, he went in the second round for a reason. He's huge. He moves well. Alfred Green, a defensive lineman from Laurier. Laurier defensive linemen just translate to the CFL. They just do. I don't know why. They have a damn good defensive lineman coach down there, and great program. So Kwaku Boateng, the edge rusher for Edmonton, actually is a Laurier grad. And then they rounded it out with Tyler Packer from Calgary, 6'6", 315 offensive lineman. So size to protect Mike Riley, who was one of the most hit quarterbacks in the CFL in 2019. So they needed to address that, and they did, plus getting some defensive help too.
How do they balance it? And we're, coming into all this and especially with the COVID year, and we have 2 years now, and you feel like it's like a backup of all this talent, right? And then some can go back to the States, and some are playing now. And then some, I was trying to make sense. TSN had Farhan on, and he was talking about how, like you were saying, some of the players, they're stashing them for later. Some of them, they're going to just hang. I mean, how do you balance? It just seems like it's a lot more, NFL, like Trevor Lawrence is starting, September, whatever. How do you balance that? And how do fans work through that?
It's tough. A lot of these guys are going to go back. You're right. With the NFL, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, they're going. Those are your starting quarterbacks. And then when you get these guys drafted in the CFL, a guy like Cole Nelson, he might go back. A guy like Daniel Joseph, he's definitely going back. So you're not going to see these guys necessarily right away. There are going to be some oddities. I mean, guys show up in camp and they just ball. And that's end of story. There was a guy out of Western University here in Ontario. They're one of the premier programs in Canada. Fraser Stopik, he was one of the top defensive players coming out of Canada, went high in the CFL draft, had a heck of a camp, and he stuck around on specials. So, if fans that really follow the CFL draft and really love the CFL draft, Fraser Sopik cracks a roster, and they see that and they love that. But the average fan, right, like, it doesn't matter what league you're in, whether it's, U Sports, NCAA, CFL, XFL, NFL, Spring League, how often do you pay attention to a teamer? It's not often. But for these guys, special teams is the way to crack a roster. So maybe not right now, first 2-3 years, he's not a known player because he's just playing gunner on punt. But you get a guy who then cracks the roster, works his way in, whether it be through play or through injuries. Circumstances happen, like Enoch Mwamba, who is in Montreal and now in Toronto, stuck around, cracked the team through special teams. They kind of had a need at linebacker. He filled it. All of a sudden, he's a Canadian starter on your team, and he's one of the most recognizable players in Montreal. So it takes longer for these guys to develop. And, I think Canadian fans recognize that a little bit because guys do go back and they have to develop. And then it takes them a little bit to develop when they're in the CFL because there's so much, because we can then go pull from the American talent pool, right? So those guys often, like a Jake Burt, if he didn't get drafted, he was getting signed and played right away. So he steps in and he takes over a role, and, fans know him from day one. So it's a little bit tougher, but I think fans realize it here.
So you've broken down two teams. Who is kind of those last players picked that you think will have the biggest impact? Maybe one or two, like a Tom Brady type. I'm not saying that you're the CFL's version of Tom Brady, but one of those late picks, 6th round, that you think is going to make waves.
Okay, so you want late, and I'm going to go really late. How about the last pick in the CFL draft? I'm going with the last guy off the board, Miles Manilow, a linebacker from the University of Western. I'm going to bring them up again. I know they're Canada's favorite team to hate on, but they just put pros into the league. They're like the Alabama up here every year. It's like, oh yeah, they won their conference. Oh yeah, they're going to the national championship. So they're a pretty good program. But Miles Manilow was a linebacker there, 6'2", 230-pound linebacker. And we actually found this guy's tape evaluating an offensive lineman's tape. So Bryce Bell, the 11th pick in the CFL draft, Laurier offensive lineman, big guy. We found Miles Manilow because he was coming on a B-gap blitz. Bryce Bell kind of met him in the hole, and Miles Manilow blew Bryce Bell up, drove him back, got to the quarterback, made the play, and we kind of were sitting there going, oh, who's this guy? And then we started watching his tape more and more and more. And Miles Manilow, like a Fraser Sopik, I think he has that special teams ability, the special teams size. Defensive players, they just love to run downfield and hit people, and that's what special teams is, right? Like kickoff in the CFL, you got to run it out or you're giving up the 1 point. So, hey, Miles, go run downfield and hit that guy as hard as you can. Just get hot to ball. So,
did you track any of the Canadian players that were in the NFL draft from last week?
I did, yeah. So Javon Holland, I'm gonna admit this on air. I'm a Detroit Lions fan. Oh, wow. And so sitting in the second round, I'm sitting there going, hey, Detroit's a DB needy team. Javon Holland's still on the board. He's coming up. DB out of Oregon. Unfortunately, he goes to Miami. Not unfortunately for him. I'd rather play in Miami than Detroit, no questions. So Javon Holland, he went high, and I think he's going to make a difference. Another DB, Benjamin St. Just, the Montreal native out of Minnesota. He went, believe he went in the 3rd or 4th round as well.
3rd at 74. Palmer. I have my notes here that we're going to talk. Yeah, you're right. 3rd round.
3rd round. And then a guy like Josh Palmer, another playmaker. So, there was a lot of, I think there was, including UDFA signings, I believe there was 8 Canadians signed or drafted to NFL teams this year, which is awesome to see. And Javon Holland was the highest Canadian drafted in, I believe, Canadian draft history. So that was awesome to see as well.
Yeah, I think Detroit. I think they're working on something this year. I believe in Dan Campbell. I watch a lot of Good Morning Football, and they were talking about their line that they drafted, and all these guys are like 300 pounds, and they said they're definitely building a culture down there that I think is going to be good.
I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I say this every year, and I get disappointed every year. But I think this is the first year I can actually say I'm excited to watch some Detroit Lions football.
So now, we're through the CFL draft. We're getting, August 5th. Are we in a waiting game now till June to kind of figure out what happens with training camps and things, or what are you guys working on in the meantime?
I think so. I think we're just kind of waiting for a start date at this point. I mean, the draft going forth to me, it indicates that they're doing everything they can behind the scenes to get something going. As far as I've heard, they're trying to push for a start date. I believe maybe August. Training camp's probably end of July is what I don't know that, but that's just kind of what I would expect based on the arc of where it's going right now. But there was the message from the commissioner. We are going to have a season. I know he said a lot of things, but I think he's working hard. He wants to see football just as much as, the fans do, I believe, at this point, whether it's, for financial reasons or getting players on the field, but we want to see some football up here. He recognizes that, but, camps, the draft indicates to me camps are going to happen. Guys keep signing, which indicates to me it's going to happen. I mean, Toronto just went out and signed their second overall pick yesterday, I should say. Dejon Brissett, the wide receiver out of Virginia, he got drafted high last year. They signed him this week, so they're not signing him for no reason.
What realistically, what do you think? What do you think we're looking at total games wise? Is it going to be the 13, 14, 15, or maybe a 9?
I think they're going to do, 13. I don't know. It's tough to say. 13, 14, 15 is what I want to say. Really, though, I mean, a December Grey Cup is not that unrealistic. I mean, we play well into November anyways. It's a couple weeks later. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit colder, but still, Hamilton is not, like, relative to some of the other cities in Ontario. Like, you're not playing north in Montreal. You're not playing north in Ottawa. I mean, it snowed in November. It's going to snow in December. It's relatively the same weather, I would say. I mean, BC would obviously be the, they'd be the ideal choice because they have the dome out there, but Hamilton won the bid. It's going to be hosted in Hamilton. I think we're going to see a December Grey Cup.
I thought I saw someone just tweet about that it just snowed. There was a dusting of snow somewhere in April or in May. And I was like, okay, see, then we're not going to win. I mean, we're not, because we're talking February XFL. I'm like, okay, well, if it's snowing in May, we're never going to win anything. So, like, what we just, at some point, you got to put a jacket on, I guess. I don't know. I lose patience at that point.
Unfortunately, I was part of that snow. That was in Eastern Ontario. It was out Ottawa way. So I got hit hard with that. That was awesome.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, was that just this week it snowed?
It was the past weekend, weekend, just like the weekend of the NFL draft. I was watching the NFL draft and it was snowing. I was like, this is fitting in Canada.
That's May. Wow.
Yeah.
Connor O'Neill, CF Perspective. Thanks for joining us talking about the CFL draft. We'll look to have you on hopefully as the season draws closer.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. It's a lot of fun. Love talking with you guys. So
we really, we appreciate the experts and expertise and analysis. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Stay safe.